When people speak about love, they often mean safety. They mean protection. They mean being kept away from harm. They mean someone watching closely, ready to step in before anything goes wrong. To love, in this sense, is to prevent pain. If something hurts, love should stop it. If something breaks, love should fix it. If someone falls, love should catch them. This understanding feels natural. It is how human love usually appears. Parents try to protect their children. Friends try to shield each other from loss. Partners try to remove obstacles from each other's lives. And when this protection works, it feels like love. But when it fails, when pain still arrives, we begin to doubt. If love was present, how could this happen? If someone truly cared, why did they allow this? And when this logic is applied to God, the tension becomes stronger. If God is love, should not suffering be prevented entirely? Should not every danger be removed before it reaches us? Should not every wrong turn be corrected in advance? This is often the unspoken expectation, that divine love should function like absolute protection, a love that intervenes constantly, a love that never allows loss, a love that keeps everything under control. But control has a hidden cost. A life fully controlled is a life without real choice. If every harmful outcome is blocked, then every meaningful decision is also limited. If every fall is prevented, then balance is never learned. If every mistake is erased, then responsibility never forms. So the question quietly shifts. Is love only protection, or is it also freedom? Freedom is uncomfortable. Freedom means risk. Freedom means the possibility of choosing wrongly. Freedom means that outcomes are not guaranteed. And yet without freedom, there is no authentic life. A world without the possibility of pain is also a world without the possibility of courage. A world without loss is a world without attachment. A world without error is a world without learning. If everything is decided in advance, nothing truly belongs to us. So perhaps love, at its deepest level, does not remove freedom to ensure comfort. Perhaps it honors freedom, even when that freedom leads to pain. This is difficult to accept, because it feels like abandonment. It feels like standing back when help is needed most. But is standing back always the absence of love, or can it be a different expression of love? Consider a child learning to walk. If the parent holds the child constantly, the child never learns balance. If the parent removes their hands, the child falls. From the child's perspective, the fall feels unnecessary. From the parent's perspective, the fall is part of learning. The pain is not desired, but the freedom is respected. Now imagine that scale expanding beyond childhood. Imagine it extending into life itself, into decisions, into relationships, into consequences, into suffering that is not chosen, but still exists within a system of freedom. This does not explain everything, it does not justify every pain, but it reframes the question. Instead of asking, why did love allow this? We begin to ask, what kind of love allows freedom at this level? A love that controls everything creates safety, but it also creates dependence. A love that allows freedom creates risk, but it also creates dignity. Which one reflects divine love? We often assume that a perfect being would choose perfect safety, but perhaps perfection is not about control. Perhaps it is about trust. Trust in the structure of reality. Trust in the capacity of consciousness to grow. Trust that meaning can emerge even from pain. If love removed every sharp edge from existence, would anything still feel real? If no choice could ever lead to harm, would any choice truly matter? If every story ended well, would courage, patience, or compassion ever develop? These are not answers, they are tensions, and tension is uncomfortable. It leaves no clear conclusion. It leaves space. Many people resist this view because it feels like surrender, as if saying pain is unavoidable, so stop questioning it. But this is not resignation. It is recognition. Recognition that love may not operate according to our preferences, that divine love may not mirror human love at its most anxious. Human love often tries to eliminate uncertainty. Divine love may allow uncertainty as the condition for growth. This difference creates confusion, because when we are hurting, we do not want philosophy, we want relief, we want protection. And yet history shows something quietly consistent. Moments of deep transformation often follow moments of deep struggle. Not because struggle is good, but because awareness changes when comfort disappears. This does not mean suffering is required. It means suffering is not wasted. There is a subtle distinction, one that is easy to miss when pain is fresh. A world without the possibility of suffering would also be a world without the possibility of self-discovery, because self-discovery requires facing limitation, facing uncertainty, facing consequence. If nothing could ever go wrong, nothing would ever need to be understood, nothing would ever need to mature. So perhaps love is not asking, how can I protect you from everything? Perhaps it is asking, how can I walk with you through what cannot be avoided? But walking with is quieter than rescuing. It does not announce itself. It does not stop the storm. It remains present within it. And presence is harder to notice than intervention. When pain is loud, presence feels invisible. So we assume absence. But maybe love is not absent. Maybe it is simply not controlling. This idea challenges many beliefs because it removes the expectation that love guarantees outcomes. Instead, it suggests that love guarantees something else, not comfort, not success, not safety, but the dignity of freedom, the dignity of choice, the dignity of being a participant, not a protected object. If love never allows us to fall, we never discover our own strength. If love never allows error, we never develop wisdom. If love never allows pain, we never learn compassion. And compassion is born not from protection, but from shared vulnerability. Again, this does not make pain acceptable. It does not make suffering easier. It simply opens another way of seeing love. One that does not rely on constant rescue. One that respects the complexity of a living world. A world where actions have consequences. Where freedom has weight. Where meaning emerges over time. So the question remains open. Is love meant to shield us from all harm? Or is it meant to allow us to grow into beings capable of responsibility, empathy, and awareness? If God is love, is that love expressed through control or through freedom? And if freedom is real, then pain is possible. Not because love failed, but because freedom was honored. This does not close the question, it deepens it. Because now we must ask something else. If love allows freedom, and freedom allows suffering, then what determines how deeply we suffer? Why do some pains destroy us while others transform us? Why do some people emerge more compassionate while others become bitter? What makes the difference? That is where the next part leads. When we talk about love, most of us picture safety. We imagine arms that hold tightly, walls that block danger, hands that intervene before anything can go wrong. Love, in this sense, means protection. If you love someone, you prevent their pain. If you care deeply, you remove obstacles. If harm appears, love should stop it. This understanding feels instinctive. It is learned early. A child cries and someone comes running. A child stumbles and someone reaches out. Pain is treated as a problem that love must solve, so protection becomes the language of love. And when this idea is carried into adulthood, it feels natural to extend it further. If someone truly loves me, they will keep me safe. If someone truly cares, they will not allow me to suffer. And when this logic is applied to God, the expectation becomes absolute. If God is love, then why was this not prevented? Why was there no intervention? Why was the danger not removed before it reached me? Why was the pain allowed at all? This expectation sits quietly beneath many spiritual beliefs. It is rarely spoken aloud, but it shapes disappointment. It shapes anger. It shapes the feeling that something has gone wrong. Because if love equals protection, then suffering feels like a failure. Either love was not present, or love was not strong enough, and neither option feels acceptable. But what if love has more than one expression? What if protection is only one form of love, not its deepest one? There is another possibility, often less comfortable. Love as freedom. Freedom sounds gentle, but it is not soft. Freedom carries risk. Freedom allows mistakes. Freedom includes the possibility of choosing something that hurts. And this is where discomfort begins, because freedom means love does not control outcomes. It does not guarantee safety. It does not promise that nothing will break. It simply allows life to unfold. At first glance, this does not feel like love. It feels distant. It feels passive. It feels like standing back when action is needed. But consider this carefully. A love that controls everything removes choice. A love that prevents every fall removes learning. A love that blocks every wrong turn removes responsibility. If nothing bad can ever happen, then nothing meaningful can truly happen. Because meaning requires stakes, it requires uncertainty, it requires the possibility that things might not go as planned. Imagine a world where every outcome is predetermined, where no action can lead to harm, where every decision ends well. In such a world, choice becomes cosmetic. It exists in appearance, but not in reality. You may move, but you cannot truly choose, because choice only matters when different outcomes are possible. And different outcomes include painful ones. So a world without suffering is also a world without real freedom. This is difficult to accept. Because we want love to remove pain, not permit it. We want love to protect us from the consequences of being human. But humanity itself is defined by freedom. Freedom to act, freedom to create, freedom to destroy, freedom to care, freedom to neglect. And once freedom exists, control disappears. Not because love is weak, but because love refuses to dominate. There is a difference between guidance and control, between presence and interference, between walking with and deciding for. Human love often struggles with this distinction. We want to help, but we end up controlling. We want to protect, but we end up limiting. And sometimes in trying to prevent pain, we prevent growth. This is easiest to see in small moments. A child learning to ride a bicycle. If you hold the bicycle constantly, the child never learns balance. If you let go, the child falls. The fall hurts. The tears are real. But the learning only happens when the hands release. From the outside, it may look like negligence. From within the process, it is necessary. The parent does not desire the pain. The parent allows the risk because something deeper is valued. Autonomy, confidence, strength. Now extend this image beyond childhood, into adult life, into choices that carry weight, into decisions that shape identity, into a world that is not padded. If love constantly intervenes, life becomes supervised. If love allows freedom, life becomes real. This does not make suffering good. It does not make loss acceptable. It does not erase grief, but it reframes what love may be doing when it does not intervene. Perhaps love is not absent. Perhaps it is honoring freedom. This idea feels unsettling because it removes guarantees. It says that love does not promise safety, it promises something else. Space, the space to become, the space to choose, the space to experience consequence. And consequence is not punishment, it is simply what follows from action within a structured reality. Fire burns, gravity pulls, words affect hearts, actions ripple outward. This structure does not disappear because love exists. It exists because order exists. And freedom operates within that order. So love may not be the removal of consequence, but the allowance of participation. The allowance to live within reality as it is. A love that constantly shields turns beings into dependents. A love that allows freedom turns beings into participants, participants in their own becoming. This distinction matters because it changes how we interpret suffering. If love is only protection, then suffering is evidence of absence. If love includes freedom, then suffering is evidence of risk, not desired, not celebrated, but possible, and possibility is the price of freedom. This does not resolve the emotional weight. It does not soften the ache of loss. It simply asks us to reconsider what we are asking love to be. Are we asking love to manage reality? Or are we asking love to accompany us within it? Because accompaniment is quieter than rescue. It does not interrupt events. It does not change outcomes. It remains present while things unfold. And presence is harder to detect when pain is loud. When fear dominates attention, presence feels invisible, so we assume absence. But perhaps love was never meant to override reality. Perhaps it was meant to stand within it. A love that overrides reality would create a controlled world. A love that stands within reality creates a meaningful one. Meaning is not comfortable. It grows slowly, often through contrast, often through difficulty, and never through force. This understanding leaves tension unresolved. It does not answer why this pain and not another. Why this person and not someone else? Why now? It only asks a quieter question. What kind of world allows love and freedom to exist together? And what kind of love is willing to allow risk so that something authentic can emerge? If love never allows us to fall, we never learn to stand. If love never allows error, we never develop wisdom. If love never allows vulnerability, we never learn compassion. Compassion is not learned through safety. It is learned through shared fragility, through recognizing pain in ourselves and others, through knowing what it means to be exposed. A protected world may be safe, but it is shallow. A free world is dangerous, but it is deep. So the question remains open. Is love meant to shield us from all harm, Or is it meant to trust us with freedom, even when that freedom hurts? If God is love, does that love operate through constant intervention? Or through the dignity of allowing life to unfold? This does not settle the issue. It does not end the struggle. It only shifts the direction of the question. If love allows freedom, and freedom allows suffering, then something else must shape how suffering is experienced. Something beyond events themselves. Something beyond external circumstances. That is where the next part moves. For a long time, many people have believed that suffering is a punishment. When something painful happens, the first question often is not what happened, but what did I do wrong? Pain feels personal, it feels intentional, it feels directed. And so the mind looks for a cause that makes moral sense. If I suffer, perhaps I deserve it. If someone else suffers, perhaps they made a mistake. This way of thinking appears in many traditions, sometimes openly, sometimes quietly. It offers a kind of order, a painful order, but an order nonetheless. If suffering is punishment, then the world is morally predictable. Good behavior leads to reward. Bad behavior leads to pain. This idea can feel comforting because it suggests that pain is avoidable, that if one lives correctly, suffering will stay away, that life is fair as long as the rules are followed. But lived experience does not support this idea for long. Children suffer before they understand right and wrong. Illness arrives without consulting character. Disasters do not ask who deserves what. And some of the cruelest people seem untouched by consequence. So the punishment model begins to crack, not because it is unfaithful, but because it is incomplete. It tries to explain suffering through morality alone. But reality operates through something else as well. Cause and effect. A flame burns not because it judges, but because it is hot. If a hand touches fire, pain follows. Not as punishment, not as intention, as consequence. The fire does not know you. It does not hate you, it does not teach you a lesson. It simply follows its nature, and the body follows its own. This distinction matters, because it separates morality from mechanics, it separates judgment from structure. Much of suffering can be understood not as a sentence imposed, but as a result unfolding. Gravity does not punish a fall, it pulls. A sharp object does not punish the skin, it cuts. The nervous system does not punish loss, it reacts. Pain emerges where certain conditions meet, not because of meaning, but because of function. And yet the human mind struggles to accept this, because randomness feels cruel, because structure without intention feels cold. So we prefer punishment. At least punishment implies purpose. At least it suggests someone is in control. But control does not always mean care, and meaning does not always require blame. When suffering is framed as punishment, a quiet violence appears. People begin to judge pain. They ask who deserves it. They search for reasons in character, in belief, in behavior, and when no reason appears, they invent one. Maybe you lacked faith. Maybe you did something wrong. Maybe this is meant to teach you. These explanations are often offered with good intentions, but they place a burden on the suffering person. Not only are they in pain, they must now justify it. They must explain why it happened. They must carry responsibility for something they did not choose. This deepens suffering, because pain becomes shame, loss becomes guilt, grief becomes suspicion. What if suffering is not punishment? What if it is not assigned? What if it is simply what happens when a finite being lives in a finite world? A world with bodies that break, with systems that fail, with interactions that have consequences. In such a world, suffering does not need to be deserved to exist. It only needs conditions. Illness requires biology. Accidents require motion. Conflict requires difference. None of these require moral failure. They require structure. A universe that functions according to laws. A world that operates whether we understand it or not. This does not make suffering acceptable. It does not make it easier, but it changes the question. Instead of asking, why am I being punished, we begin to ask what conditions are present. What processes are unfolding? What is happening rather than what does this mean about me? This shift is subtle, but it is powerful, because it removes moral blame from pain. It allows suffering to be seen as something that happens, not something that is given. When suffering is consequence, not punishment, it does not define worth. It does not imply failure. It does not measure faith. It simply reveals how reality functions. This perspective does not deny God. It does not deny love. It simply denies that pain is a verdict. A verdict implies intention, a consequence implies structure, and structure can exist without malice. Consider again the image of fire. If someone burns their hand, we do not accuse the fire. We learn how fire works. We adjust behavior. We gain understanding. Pain becomes information, not condemnation. Now imagine extending this understanding to life itself, to relationships, to choices, to systems. Some suffering arises from personal decisions. Some arises from other people's actions. Some arises from conditions beyond control. Biology, environment, history. When we label all of it punishment, we simplify a complex reality, and simplification feels safe, but it distorts truth. A world governed only by punishment would be a moral machine, but lived reality is not mechanical in that way. It is layered, messy, interconnected. Actions ripple outward in ways no single mind controls. And those ripples create consequences that land unevenly, not because the universe is cruel, but because it is complex. This complexity challenges our desire for fairness. We want balance. We want symmetry. We want good to be rewarded and harm to be corrected. And when that does not happen, we assume something is wrong, either with the world or with us. But what if fairness is not guaranteed at the level of events? What if fairness belongs to another dimension entirely, a dimension of meaning, not mechanism? This is where confusion often arises. We mix moral expectation with physical reality. We expect reality to behave ethically, but reality behaves structurally. Ethics emerge from conscious beings, not from gravity, not from biology, not from weather. When suffering is attributed to punishment, God becomes a judge of events. Every pain becomes a message, every loss becomes a statement, and silence becomes accusation. But if suffering is consequence, God is no longer the author of pain. God becomes the ground within which structure exists, not the manager of every outcome. This distinction changes how we relate to suffering. It removes the need to interpret pain as intention. It removes the need to decode tragedy, and it opens space for something else: presence, compassion, understanding. If suffering is punishment, the appropriate response is obedience. If suffering is consequence, the appropriate response is awareness. Awareness of cause, awareness of limitation, awareness of interconnection. This awareness does not eliminate pain, but it changes our relationship to it. Pain no longer asks, "What did I do to deserve this?" It asks, "What is happening here?" And that question is quieter, less violent, more honest. It allows grief without self-attack. It allows sorrow without moral collapse, and it allows compassion without judgment. Because if suffering is consequence, then anyone can suffer. Not because they failed, but because they are alive in a world that functions through interaction. This does not make suffering meaningless. It simply removes blame from it. Meaning may still emerge, but it emerges from response, not from assignment, from how pain is met, not why it was sent. This perspective leaves a question open. If suffering is not punishment and not intention, then where does meaning come from? How do some people become bitter while others become tender? What shapes the inner experience of pain? Why does the same event destroy one person and deepen another? If suffering is consequence, then something else determines how it is lived, something within awareness itself. Two people stand in the same place. They experience the same loss, the same event, the same words spoken, the same absence left behind, and yet their suffering is not the same. One breaks open, the other hardens. One becomes quieter, more attentive, more gentle. The other becomes bitter, angry, or numb. The event is shared, the pain is shared, but the depth of suffering is different. This difference raises a quiet question. If suffering were caused only by events, would not everyone suffer equally? If pain were only a result of circumstance, would not identical circumstances produce identical pain? But they do not. Something else is involved, something subtle, something internal, something that cannot be seen from the outside. Awareness. Not awareness as knowledge, not awareness as information, but awareness as relationship. The relationship we have with what is happening. Pain enters the body through sensation, through loss, through shock. That part is unavoidable. But suffering goes further. It stays. It grows. It repeats. It tightens. And often it is not the event itself that causes this continuation. It is how the mind holds the event, how it replays it, how it resists it, how it becomes it. This is difficult to see when pain is fresh because pain demands attention. It pulls focus inward. It feels total. It feels like everything. So we assume there's nothing else present. But awareness is present, even then, quietly, not judging, not fixing, simply noticing. When awareness is faint, pain feels overwhelming. When awareness is clearer, pain is still there, but it is no longer everything. This does not mean the pain disappears. It means the pain is no longer alone. There is space around it. Consider this carefully. Pain is an experience. Suffering is the contraction around that experience, the tightening, the clinging, the refusal, the story that says this should not be happening, the story that says this defines me, the story that says this will never end. These stories are not evil. They are attempts to protect. The mind tries to regain control by explaining, by blaming, by anticipating. But these attempts often deepen suffering, because they turn pain into identity. Instead of pain is happening, it becomes this is who I am now. Instead of this hurts, it becomes I am broken. Instead of this is difficult, it becomes this should not exist. And resistance grows. Resistance to reality. Resistance to feeling. Resistance to the present moment. This resistance is understandable. No one welcomes pain. No one invites loss. But resistance has a cost. What we resist does not disappear. It tightens. What we cling to does not stay. It hurts more when it leaves. Awareness does not remove pain. It changes our relationship to it. Instead of merging with pain, awareness observes it. Instead of becoming the story, awareness notices the story. Instead of collapsing into the experience, awareness creates a small distance. Not distance as avoidance, distance as space. This space is not cold. It is gentle. It allows breathing. It allows movement. It allows pain to be felt without becoming identity. When awareness is absent, pain feels personal. It feels like an attack. It feels like a verdict. When awareness is present, pain feels like a process, a movement, something passing through rather than something final. This does not make pain easy. It makes it workable. It allows grief without drowning. It allows sadness without collapse. It allows anger without violence. This is why two people can experience the same loss and suffer differently. Not because one cares less, not because one is stronger, but because one is more aware of what is happening inside, more aware of sensation without becoming it, more aware of thought without believing it completely, more aware of emotion without identifying with it entirely. Awareness is not detachment. It is intimacy without fusion. It is being close without being consumed. Many misunderstand this. They think awareness means suppressing emotion or bypassing pain or pretending nothing hurts. That is not awareness. That is avoidance. True awareness includes pain fully. It does not deny it. It does not minimize it. It allows pain to be exactly what it is, without adding extra layers of interpretation, without asking what does this say about me, without asking why should this not be happening. Those questions arise naturally. Awareness simply notices them, and in noticing they lose some of their power, because what is seen clearly cannot dominate completely. This is subtle. It happens slowly, often in moments so small they are almost missed. A pause between thoughts, a breath felt in the chest, a sensation noticed without commentary. In those moments, suffering loosens slightly. Not because the situation changes, but because the relationship changes. The pain is still there, but it is no longer the whole field. There is pain, and there is awareness of pain. That difference matters. Without awareness, pain feels endless. With awareness, pain is seen to move, to change, to intensify and soften, to come and go. Even grief has waves. Even despair has pauses. Awareness notices this movement. And in noticing, hope does not need to be manufactured. It arises naturally from seeing impermanence. This does not mean everything passes quickly. Some pain stays a long time. Some wounds take years. Awareness does not rush healing. It does not demand progress. It stays. Patient, attentive, present. This presence itself is what reduces suffering. Not by force, not by control, but by allowing what is to be seen clearly. When pain is allowed, it completes its cycle. When pain is resisted, it repeats. This does not mean resistance is wrong. Resistance is human. It arises automatically. Awareness does not fight resistance. It notices resistance. And in that noticing, resistance softens, slowly, gently, without command. This is why awareness is so central to suffering. Not because awareness eliminates pain, but because awareness prevents pain from turning into identity, from turning into meaning, from turning into self-condemnation. Pain is part of life. Suffering is optional, but not in the way we think. Optional does not mean chosen. It means influenced. It means shaped. It means deepened or softened by awareness. This understanding does not blame the sufferer. It does not say you are suffering because you are unaware. It says awareness is a capacity that can grow. And as it grows, suffering changes shape, becomes less solid, less absolute, less defining. The event remains, the loss remains, but the inner experience becomes more spacious. This is not a solution. It is an observation, a quiet one, that the deepest pain often comes not from what happened, but from how tightly the mind holds it. And when the holding loosens even slightly, suffering loosens too. This does not deny injustice. It does not deny cruelty. It does not deny grief. It simply acknowledges that there is another layer beneath events. A layer where freedom exists. Not freedom from pain, freedom within pain. And this freedom is not given from outside. It arises from awareness itself. So the question shifts again. If awareness shapes suffering, then where does awareness come from? Is it something we create, something we develop, or something that is already present, waiting to be recognized? And if awareness is present even in pain, then what does that say about where God is when suffering occurs? When suffering arrives, one question rises almost automatically. Where is God now? Not as a theological problem, not as a debate, but as a human cry. Where is God when the body is weak, when the heart is breaking, when prayers feel unanswered? Many people search for God in moments of rescue, in sudden healing, in miracles, in interventions that change outcomes. And when those moments do not come, disappointment follows. Sometimes quietly, sometimes with anger, because the expectation was clear. If God is present, something should change. If God is near, pain should stop. So when pain continues, it feels like absence, or abandonment, or indifference. This expectation is understandable. It comes from a deep longing to be saved, to be spared, to be lifted out of what hurts. But when that does not happen, faith becomes fragile. Some people walk away, others stay but at a distance, still believing but cautiously, still praying but without confidence, and some stop searching altogether. They conclude that God must exist only in theory, or not at all. But there is another experience, less dramatic, less visible. Some people encounter God not when pain disappears, but when it is fully felt. Not in rescue, but in presence. Not in escape, but in endurance. This sounds strange because pain does not feel sacred. It feels chaotic. It feels raw. It feels lonely. And yet within that loneliness, some people report something unexpected. A quiet stillness, a subtle awareness, a sense of being held without being removed. Nothing changes externally. The situation remains, the loss remains. But something inside does not collapse. There is pain, and yet there is also space. This experience is difficult to explain, because it does not fit the usual image of God. A God who intervenes, a God who fixes, a God who controls outcomes. Instead, it suggests a different kind of presence, a presence that does not stand outside suffering, waiting to eliminate it, but one that exists within suffering itself, not as pain, but as awareness, as the capacity to feel without being destroyed, as the quiet witness that remains intact even when everything else feels broken. This raises a subtle shift in perspective. What if God is not found by looking away from suffering, but by looking directly into it? Not to glorify pain, not to justify it, but to see what remains when everything else falls apart, when identity dissolves, when certainty collapses, when control disappears. What remains then? Some traditions speak of God as light, others as love, others as presence, others as being itself. But all of these point not to an external figure moving objects around. They point to something fundamental, something that does not come and go, something that does not depend on circumstances. If God is identified only with positive outcomes, then God disappears the moment suffering appears. But if God is identified with presence itself, then God is never absent, only unnoticed. This does not mean suffering is divine. It does not mean pain is holy. It means that suffering does not exclude presence. It means that even in pain there is awareness. And awareness is not harmed by what it observes. The body can be wounded, the heart can break, the mind can collapse, but awareness remains, watching, feeling, allowing, not interfering, not explaining, simply present. Some people meet God here, not because they wanted to, not because they were seeking, but because everything else was stripped away. There was nothing left to hold on to, no belief, no expectation, no image, only what was happening, and the awareness of it. This awareness does not speak loudly. It does not offer reasons. It does not say this is happening for a purpose. It does not promise resolution. It simply stays. And staying turns out to be powerful, because abandonment is not about pain. It is about being alone in pain. And awareness is never alone. It is always present with what is happening. This presence can feel like love, not sentimental love, not comforting words, but a steady, non-withdrawing presence. A presence that does not turn away from what hurts. If love is defined as never leaving, then love does not require the removal of pain. It requires faithfulness, the faithfulness to remain present when pain arises. So perhaps God is not absent in suffering. Perhaps God is misunderstood. We look for God in outcomes, but God may be found in relationship. Not a relationship that controls events, but one that shares experience. Not one that rescues from pain, but one that refuses to abandon within pain. This does not erase the longing for relief. It does not silence the cry for help. It does not make grief noble. It simply changes where we look. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" we begin to ask, "What is present here that is not broken? What is aware of this pain? What remains when everything else is unstable?" This question is not intellectual. It is experiential. It is felt in moments of stillness, in pauses between sobs, in breaths taken when there is no strength left. In those moments, something holds, not physically, not emotionally, but existentially. And that holding does not remove pain. It allows pain to be held. This may be what some mean when they say God is close to the brokenhearted. Not because brokenness is desired, but because presence becomes obvious when there is nothing left to distract from it. In comfort, we overlook presence. In suffering, we notice it. Not always. Not consistently, but sometimes. And sometimes is enough to change everything. This does not prove God. It does not argue for belief. It simply describes a shift in experience. From seeking God as an external solution to recognizing presence as an internal constant. If God is love, and love does not abandon, then love does not disappear when pain appears. It appears differently, quieter, less dramatic, but more intimate. This love does not explain suffering. It does not justify injustice. It does not excuse cruelty. It simply stays. And staying may be the deepest form of love. This perspective does not answer every question. It does not make sense of every tragedy. It only suggests that God may not be found where we expect, not above suffering, not outside it, but within the very capacity to be conscious while suffering unfolds. And if that is true, then suffering becomes not a sign of abandonment, but a place where presence can be discovered, not as belief, but as experience. This does not conclude anything. It opens another question. If God is present within awareness itself, then what does that mean for how we live, for how we respond to pain, for how we meet others who are suffering? And if love does not remove pain but remains within it, what is love inviting us to do? Perhaps the question has been slightly misplaced. Perhaps it was never meant to be answered in the way we usually expect. For a long time, people have asked why God allows suffering, why pain exists at all, why a loving reality includes loss, illness, grief, and injustice. But what if this question, as sincere as it is framed from a limited angle? What if it assumes that the purpose of love is to remove all difficulty? What if it assumes that the highest good is comfort? And what if life itself quietly suggests otherwise? Maybe the deeper question is not why suffering exists. Maybe it is what kind of beings we become in its presence. Because suffering does something, not always something good, not always something noble, but something undeniable. It interrupts, it slows, it strips away illusion, it reveals what we cling to. It shows us what matters when everything else falls away. If life were entirely painless, what would we seek? If nothing ever threatened us, what would awaken us? If no loss ever occurred, would we ever learn to value? These are not arguments in favor of pain. They are observations about how humans change. Most people do not begin their deepest questioning from comfort. They begin from rupture, from moments when old explanations no longer work, from times when certainty dissolves, from experiences that cannot be managed by surface understanding. Suffering often brings us to the edge of what we know, and at that edge something opens, not automatically, not for everyone, but often enough to notice a pattern. People begin to ask different questions, not how do I win, not how do I secure, but what is real, what remains when identity collapses, what is here when there is nothing left to hold on to. Truth is rarely sought in times of ease. Compassion is rarely learned without exposure to pain. Awakening rarely happens in a life that has never been shaken. Again, this does not justify suffering. It simply recognizes its role in human development. Suffering does not teach by intention. It teaches by pressure. It presses against the structures we rely on, beliefs, stories, expectations. And when those structures fail, we are forced to look deeper, sometimes unwillingly, sometimes angrily, sometimes desperately, but the looking happens. If there were no suffering, what would drive us inward? What would push us to question appearances? What would invite us to examine consciousness itself? A life without friction produces little reflection. This is not a moral claim. It is a human one. Growth often comes through disruption, not because disruption is good, but because it removes distraction. So perhaps the question shifts. Instead of asking, why is this allowed, what is being revealed? Not revealed as a lesson, not revealed as a command, but revealed as an opportunity to see more clearly, to feel more deeply, to understand more honestly. If God is love and love does not abandon, then love may not be trying to explain suffering. Love may be inviting a different response to it, not resignation, not glorification, but presence. Presence with ourselves, presence with others, presence with reality as it is. When suffering appears, many instincts arise, to escape, to numb, to harden, to blame. These instincts are natural, but there is another possibility, to stay, to remain open even when it hurts. To allow pain without becoming it, to meet others without judgment. This response is not forced, it cannot be commanded. It emerges when awareness deepens, and awareness often deepens through suffering. Not always, but often enough to matter. If there were no suffering, would compassion exist? Compassion is not sympathy, it is not pity, it is the recognition of shared vulnerability. And shared vulnerability is learned through exposure, through knowing pain personally, through recognizing it in another. A world without suffering would be a world without this recognition. It would be efficient, safe, predictable, but it would lack depth. Depth comes from what costs something, from what is earned through presence, from what cannot be taken lightly. So if God is love, perhaps love is not asking us to avoid pain at all costs. Perhaps love is asking us to meet pain honestly, without denial, without cruelty, without turning away from ourselves or from others. Love may not remove suffering, but it may transform how suffering is lived, not by changing events, but by changing relationship, the relationship to experience, the relationship to each other, the relationship to existence itself. So instead of asking why this world contains suffering, we might ask what kind of world this is, a world where freedom exists, where awareness exists, where meaning is not imposed but discovered. A world where love does not control outcomes but invites response. If that is true, then suffering is not an answer. It is a condition within which human consciousness evolves. An evolution is not gentle, it is not neat, it is slow, uneven, often painful, but it produces depth, it produces humility, it produces the capacity to hold complexity. If there were no suffering, would we ever question the surface of things? Would we ever doubt our assumptions? Would we ever look beyond appearances? Suffering cracks certainty, and in that crack, light sometimes enters. Not because suffering is light, but because certainty blocks vision. This is not a conclusion. It does not explain every tragedy. It does not comfort every loss. It does not reconcile every injustice. It simply leaves us with a different orientation. Instead of demanding answers, we remain with questions. Questions that are alive. Questions that breathe. Questions that mature as we do. Perhaps the question is not meant to be closed. Perhaps closing it too quickly would shrink it and shrink us. So we allow it to remain open, not as a problem to solve, but as a companion. A companion that keeps us honest, that keeps us humble, that keeps us attentive. If God is love, then love may not be a conclusion. It may be an invitation to stay present, to stay curious, to stay compassionate in a world that hurts. Not because we understand it, but because we are part of it. And maybe that is enough to begin, not an answer, but a way of being with a question. And perhaps for now, that is where the story rests.